Just going to wait for the signal. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Avalon Rising Conference Dome at Sunrise 2011. This is our first official lecture tonight with Peter Taylor, who's going to be discussing some of his research from his book Chill, amongst other things, looking at the implications of that on us and of the Earth. So we've got lots of talks lined up over the next couple of days, pretty much 14 hours a day non-stop from tomorrow morning, so prepare yourself. And we're going on until midnight tonight as well, so please stick around and get all the knowledge that's being shared over these next few days. It's a really incredible lineup we've managed to pull together, so welcome. And so please give a warm welcome to Peter Taylor, and we'll crack on with Avalon Rising.
Thank you. I'm always amazed that anyone comes to a lecture at a festival, especially such a chilled out festival as this one. I was part of the original team that got together, must be 7 or 8 years ago. It was an Earth Heart festival, and then eventually became Sunrise. And most of the time, or in fact all of the time in that early time, I was mostly involved with the dance teams, shamanic dance teams. And over the last couple of years, I've got back into my previous profession, which was as a scientist, as an ecologist. I got involved with looking at climate change, and I've written a recent book about that. But what I'd really like to do with this time is to bring those two worlds together and look at the world as a climate scientist would look at it, because I've been involved with the climate scientists and what they think and how they see things happening, and how the shamanic world sees what's happening, and see if we can find, well, actually, I have seen relationships between those two worlds which I would not have seen if I hadn't been involved, and particularly in environmental, which I go way back to the beginning of Greenpeace. So in terms of my greenness and my environmental commitment, it's been total, it's been my whole life. What I see now happening is very different from those very early days when we were campaigning for protection of the oceans, saving the whales, against nuclear power. I did all of that, and I used my scientific training to underpin the environmental campaigns that we were fighting. We now have a massive campaign to stop climate chaos, and all my former organizations that I work with are involved with that. Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, the World Wildlife Fund, even the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. And there's a UNICEF team here campaigning for all the children who are going to be affected by climate change. And the problem I had with all of that campaigning was that it saw the world in a particular way and the answers to climate change in a particular way, without really looking at what those answers would do to the things that we really care about: beauty, community, continuity, and biodiversity, and wildlife. Nobody was looking at the impact of all the policies that they were fighting for. And I started to ask, I said, okay, I see what you're advocating in relation to renewable energy, but where's your impact studies? Because renewable energy is not impact-free. And they hadn't done them. Greenpeace, World Wildlife Fund, RSPB, and they still haven't done them. They are concentrating on the overall political message. And if they win that in Parliament, so you get a decision such as we've made, we're going to reduce our emissions by 80% by 2050, that's regarded as an achievement or a campaign goal or a target that's been met. But actually, very little has happened. Other than turbines up in the hills, but actually the use of energy is still increasing planet-wide. So I then thought, well, a lot of the impacts are made worse by the fact that there's absolutely no strategic planning going on. There's no studying of the impacts. For example, we'll sign up for biofuels in our petrol tanks, 5% by 2010, 2012 or whatever. That's all been done. But nobody then looks at where do the biofuels come from? Tropical forests being cut down, biofuels being planted, people being moved off the land into cities, community being destroyed, livelihoods being destroyed, wildlife being destroyed. They're waking up now, but the campaigns to achieve all of those targets didn't look at the consequences of those campaigns until it was too late. And now they're saying, well, hang on a minute, the biofuels thing, we've got to look at that more carefully. So I then looked at the science behind climate change. Again, I was involved in the 90s and I thought I understood it and I accepted it. And all my colleagues accepted the science. And I thought, well, I'll study it again just to find out how much time we've really got. And I'll tell you about what I found, but what I found really shocked me. And I produced a report and I put it online for 2 years and I said, look, you're not going to like this, guys, but you know the bad guys, the people like SO and the oil people and the coal people, and you've been saying they're all deniers and it's all carbon dioxide. Well, actually, they're right. The enemy has actually got truth on their side, because what's happening, the climate is changing, but it's changing too fast to be due to carbon dioxide. Maybe a little bit carbon dioxide. And so I was studying the natural cycles. But then I thought, how come I'm the only one to see this? And that's the purpose of part of the talk, is how come? And then when I stand up and I say, look, you know me, you know whose side I'm on, and you know I'm a good scientist, I'm a good analyst. So what are we going to do about this? But they didn't want to meet. Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, World Wildlife, they did not want to meet. They didn't want to talk about it. There were people who would say they wouldn't even be in the same room as me because they hadn't read anything, heard something that I'd said. So then I was asked to write a book after a presentation rather like this, and I did that. Again, I thought, well, this book isn't peer-reviewed and I'm dealing with science. So I went to an old friend of mine. This man is a professor, a retired professor, world-leading scientist. I worked with him throughout the 80s and the 90s on ocean protection. He then went on, when we won the battle about protecting the oceans, and we did, we won a lot. He went on to the Climate Convention. He helped create the treaty. He drafted the Kyoto Protocol, which many of you will have heard about. I said, look, please look at this work that I've done. You know me. And he says, you can't possibly be right, Peter. You know, the whole UN, all the science. And I said, no, it's not true. If you go to the UN's technical reports, not the stuff they give the policymakers, you know how that works. You go to the science, it does not say what they're saying. And he read it. And he endorsed the book. It's on the cover of the book, saying, these questions have got to be answered. Now that book's been out since June 2009, so that's 2 years. They still will not meet and they won't answer the questions. I've had one invitation from one university because there's one particular guy who knows me, and I work in ecology in biodiversity realms, so he knows my work. And he said, oh, come and talk to us about climate change. But you'll get a hard ride because we've got a lot of research going in the university on that. And they did give me a hard time, but it was full-on scientific debate, and I could hold that up. But that's the only university. All of the green movement do not want to know. They don't want to question it. So that's the background that I'm coming to you with. Now, some of you here will know me from a completely different background, from the background of shamanic dance. This world, this alternative world. Now, if I talk about some of the things I know about, astrology, homeopathy, the energy body, the chakras, astral realities, the dream world, astral travel. I mention any of those, I'm dead in the water. If I'm in a straight world lecture, I have to completely step out of the kinds of things that we can discuss. Just to mention those things, it's like, oh, who's this? And they will, honestly, you'll get people walking out. So in this time, and I'm really grateful for so many of you showing up. I said to Hugh, 8:30 on a Thursday, they'll just be arriving, there won't be anybody there. But yeah, no, I mean, even if it's just a couple of people. So what I'd like to do is use the time that we have together. So I'm going to move fairly quickly through the presentation, and then we'll have more time for a little bit of meat, because there's something very, very important going on, and I think we've got 18 months to sort it out. So first of all, let's go back to how I was trained. How do scientists see the world? And I had a very straight training. First of all, the only relationships that count are the ones that you can measure. And then they start looking at quantity. And all the time you're dealing with surface reality. Particles, waveforms. If you talk to the physicists, they'll say, you know, some very strange things, which biologists and chemists and climate scientists never talk about, even though they're supposed to be scientists. They'll not talk about what physicists talk about, that particles come in and out of existence. You can measure them and then they're gone. And you suddenly measure them from somewhere else. And if anybody has ever studied quantum physics, you'll know that beneath the surface reality, there is what is called a quantum reality, or as Paul Laviolette called the subquantum, and what we would call consciousness itself, or the dream world. Modern science appears not to accept that that world exists, and that if it does, it's anything more than an imaginary dream world. But physicists will do, that's where all the power comes from. Everything, every particle, every body, every form is actually vibrationary waveform. It's like frozen waves. Of what? What are the waves on? Now, early scientists, they knew. And I'll talk to you about that because there's a big deception going on. This country held the first institute for science worldwide, called the Royal Society. It was founded around 1650. Every single member of the founding committee was not only a practicing Freemason, they were practicing alchemists. And in fact, they were alchemists who had left alchemy because it wasn't getting them anywhere and become Freemasons. So they were Masonic alchemists. And what that means is that they had a whole training and a whole world which was inner reality. Alchemy wasn't playing with little chemistry sets. That was a cover to make sure the church didn't come along, get you arrested and tortured and executed. What those chemists were doing was a code for what we all do with our yoga training. And in fact, it's a code for what we do in Tantra yoga training, which is called, they call the alchemical marriage. That alchemical marriage is inner work on your consciousness. What happened to that? 1650. It's not there now in the scientific world. Or is it? We don't know, because that society is now secret. It's still secret. Masonic society is secret. What happens behind those Masonic doors? Most of the time, and for the majority of people, not very much. It's a bit like the Rotary Club. But the higher up you go, you are dealing with what was called in 1650 Magus territory. And I recommend a book called The Magus of Freemasonry. It's recently out by an Exeter academic called Thomas Churton. It's really good because it looks at the life of one of those early alchemist, scientist, masons, and how he was struggling particularly with the alchemical marriage. You couldn't find a female partner who was sufficiently evolved to do the work. Why not? Most of them have been executed, burnt at the stake. Anyone with any real feminine consciousness had been systematically persecuted for several hundred years. The women teachers didn't exist. So alchemy, you couldn't do the alchemical marriage because you couldn't find a partner who was sufficiently empowered to meet you with the energy field of what we would call the divine feminine. So what did the alchemists do? They went and joined the Freemasons because the Masons said, we don't use women. We don't have them. We have our own secret teachings, which remain secret. Now in yogic territory, you can go either way. You can do Tantra with a partner to work this energy, or you can be alone in a cave and do the whole yogic trip alone. It's the same work. And that's what I want to talk about, because that's the whole nature of the deception here. What I discovered in the climate science work, which is the only reason I've added it to the agenda, is I was interested as to why they'd got it wrong, so badly wrong. They thought that all of the warming they saw, and there was a big acceleration from 1980 to about 2000, they thought that was all down to carbon dioxide emissions, which had gone up at the same time. And so when I looked at it, I thought, well, what would it have done naturally during that time? And you go through all the documents, and they were saying, well, we don't really know what it would have done naturally. And I'm saying, well, you don't, because you're a bunch of mathematical physicists with computer models. But if you go to talk to the paleoclimate scientists, the ones that get their hands dirty in all the sediments and study the ice cores, they will tell you there are all manner of harmonic cycles. And when you study them, guess when they peak? Exactly the same time. It's like you set several waves going, seventh wave effect. They all peak at the same time, exactly the same time, between 1980 and 2005. So I then say to the scientists, how can you say it's all carbon dioxide? Ah, the computer model. Now, I've dealt with computer models before when they've said, according to our computer models, low-level radiation cannot have any effect. And then I went along and I said, well, look, because I'm not a hands-on scientist, I work in scientific circles, and I could go along and say, well, what about Dr. Alice Stewart's work? She was told low-level radiation didn't have any effect, but she went to the data, and that is counting the number of children dying of leukemia from the women who had been x-rayed when they were pregnant. And she was one person. The whole of the UN disagreed, and every single science institute in the world disagreed when she started her investigation. And I know, because I was part of the legal team that fought to get her work through the UN. Now, nobody x-rays pregnant women. It's all accepted that low-level radiation does have an effect. Now, being part of that world taught me you cannot rely on the authority of the UN, nor can you rely on the authority of all of the scientific institutions. Several times they have been wrong. You remember the ozone hole and the CFCs, and how everyone came together to ban CFCs and stopped it happening? But nobody talks about the committee of the UN and all the scientific institutions that said, yeah, pump it out, man. It doesn't have any effect. They didn't know that it would have the effects that it had. There were one or two warning voices, amongst them James Lovelock. They weren't listened to. So that's my background, the analytical background, the not trusting the authority. I'm quite happy with authority when it's earned its spurs, but in these cases they come at me with computer models, and I'm saying, oh, well, hang on a minute, let me look at this a bit more closely. What I found is those computer models do not contain the natural cycles, the rhythms. And when you talk to the scientists about why not, they're irregular. Cycles are really exact. Well, in the electrical world they are. In nature, they're not exact. So you can't put them into the computer model because you don't know where they begin and where they end. So it's very hard. What struck me, I'll come to this a bit later, is that all of that cycles and rhythms, and there's a whole story about the sun's dark energy, the magnetic pulses that you don't see, dark, magnetic, cycles, rhythms. It's all feminine reality. It's all a different side of the mind to the mathematical mind that's actually creating the models. So we have a gender problem, which I'll come to. Just to give a little bit of background, I came to this particular question of climate during some government work that I was doing about 10 years ago. I have a small group of ecologists and graphic designers. We don't do a lot together now, but we did 10 years ago. We created a computer virtual reality of a typical British landscape. And you can fly into that. And you can look at it from different angles. Purely as a planning tool. This went out to all of the planning authorities in Britain. And we were concerned because if you're going to try and power the cities and the industry of Britain from renewable energy is very diffuse. Wind, wave, solar, you've got to bring it together somehow. You want to harvest the wind for a city, you need a mega turbine. It's going to be 400 feet high. And all it is an aerospace propeller on a stilt, and it thumps away with a vibration and a sound, and it's going to completely destroy your landscape. You don't need one of them, you need 10,000, 20,000. If you've been to the Scottish Highlands recently or Central Wales, take a good look. An electro-technical landscape. Beauty, community, eagles, vultures in Greece and Crete, say goodbye. If you try to power this culture from renewables without integration. Now, I was working with a team, said, let's see if we can integrate it. And we did about 3 years' work, and I just said, you can't. You can't. If you try to power this civilization from renewable energy, you will go and destroy the very things that you care about. What really disturbed me was that the Greens were saying, we've got to sacrifice all of that. I said, what? Wildlife, beauty, community? You know, what's life about? So that project, after that project, that's when I started to think, well, how much time have we got left? Shortly after that, this super duper politician, nearly very closely the most powerful man in the world, went on the campaign trail on climate change. Now, he put out a film, and he has about 9 million followers, young people, very enthusiastic, dedicated young people like yourself. They really care about the planet, and they follow him. Now, Al Gore's a very strange man. Anyone who gets to be that close to being president of the United States, you've got to look a bit more carefully at the guy. And he got a Nobel Prize for his film. And he also got an Oscar, which I think he deserved. Now, what he says here, and he made a big theatrical of it. I have to leave the mics a little bit. The red is carbon dioxide, and he's saying the carbon dioxide is causing the temperature to go up. And this is what we're doing now. So, wow, are we in for a big rise in temperature? What he didn't point out is that there's a little gap here. Everywhere you look. The temperature rises before the carbon dioxide. And you hardly notice because it's about an 800-year to 1,000-year delay in a 100,000-year cycle. There are 4 cycles. This is the Antarctic ice core record. There are 4.5 cycles that we know about. And so you hardly notice this. But every single climate scientist who studies the ice core knows that the carbon dioxide does not start the process. There is a theory that it amplifies it, that it adds a little bit to the peak. And I've been working on that with another scientist, so I'll talk about that afterwards. Thank you. Yeah. What Al Gore didn't also point out is that several years before he went on the campaign trail, he founded a very special bank. He took some of the best experts out of Goldman Sachs, who, if you know anything about banking, is quite a dark global operation. And he founded an investment bank which specialized entirely in carbon credits. So the moment that the United States signed up to Kyoto, which is what he was campaigning for, he moved from being a multimillionaire to being into the billionaire category. Now, normally, if you came to, say, the British Parliament and you made such a presentation, you would be required to declare any financial interests you had. But not for a film and a documentary, and not for the UN, and not for the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, and obviously not for the Oscars either. So he's not entirely what he seems. And in fact, he also said, there's no scientific discussion here. All the scientists are in agreement. But as vice president, he would have been around in 2001 when the US Academy of Sciences advised the US government, you cannot trust the UN's assessment. Now, they changed their mind in 2004. But in such a short time, several of the major scientific academies changed their minds. The last one to change was the Russians. The Russian Academy of Science, they had a vice president of the UN's international panel, the IPCC, Yuri Israel. He's on record of saying in the early part of 2004, all this hype, you know, it's natural cycles are driving this. That's the vice chair of the UN committee. When he got home, President Putin had a word with him. Putin had just done a deal. We're going to sign Kyoto. We get billions of carbon credits. How that works is the Russian economy is really low and not emitting as much carbon as they would really ought to be doing, you know, for their standard of living to go up. So instead of the companies here spending a lot of money on getting our emissions down, they buy emission credits from Russia worth billions. So Yuri Israel then goes, oh, so you mean I better not say what I've been saying? So that's right. Yuri Israel, because I monitor Russian science, he's just finished a report on how to cool down the planet by pumping sulfur dioxide into the top of the stratosphere and reflecting the rays of the sun. And no doubt Mr. Putin funded his little Global Ecology Institute in Moscow. So for those who are interested in science, this is actually the Greenland ice core record over a period of about 20 to 30,000 years. So this is actually in the Ice Age, about 50,000 years ago. And what you're seeing in that cold, one of the coldest parts of the planet, of the northern hemisphere, is very, very clear harmonic cycles. And if there are any I'll come over. Time is going that way. Look at how steeply this occurs. This is actually within about So I immediately asked the climate scientists, "Ooh, have you noticed the Fibonacci series in the Greenland ice record?" What? They hadn't heard of the Fibonacci series. When you go to all of the scientific papers, and this is how stupid science can sometimes be, and I've got a great deal of time for real science. What they do is they look at the 20,000 year period, they count the peaks, they divide and come up with an average. The cycle is roughly 2,000 years. And they don't even acknowledge that. And even when they say, "Oh, okay, what causes that?" So I don't know. What is there in the cosmos that can affect the ice in Greenland with a harmonic cycle? Nobody knows. And by the way, Greenland is melting down, right? It's warmer than ever, and we're faced with the loss of the ice cap and sea levels rising, and it's, you know, Arctic meltdown and so forth. Let's look at the science. This is the last 10,000 years. So, going that way, it's already warm. So this is after the Ice Age. This period is called the Holocene. So it's our time. It's for about 10,000 years, the world, the globe, is warm. For 90,000 years, it's cold. So this is our period. It's coming to an end. This is the last 2,000 years. That's that bit. This is the temperature today in Greenland. This is when the Vikings were in Greenland growing crops. We eventually get to the Roman times with nobody on Greenland, but they were growing wine up in Northumberland. This point here, pelicans nesting on the Somerset levels and being eaten by the Lake Village people. So the globe is cooling down, but it's cooling down in cycles like this, and the peaks are getting less. So how come all this stuff about Greenland and polar bears dying and the ice melting and the Arctic Ocean will not have any summer ice cover, and therefore the sun will heat up that bare ocean and the ocean will get warm? Well, a Norwegian team of specialists found what are called fossil beach structures on the north coast of Greenland. Now, in historical times, the north coast of Greenland is chocker with ice. It's never been ice-free. But 8,000 years ago, it was ice-free. So the Arctic Ocean didn't get warm. Millions of tons of methane didn't get released from the permafrost or from the sediments. The polar bears didn't die out. The whole thing was 2 or 3 degrees warmer than it is now. These things are not generally spoken about, but they are well known amongst real climate scientists who most of the time don't dare to go against the global consensus. This book raises issues and questions that must be addressed conclusively before global warming can genuinely be regarded as truth, inconvenient or otherwise. Author of the first draft of the Kyoto Protocol. Now you would think, with friends like that, I would at least get invited to talk to top-level Greenpeace people. Not a dicky bird. So what is a shaman trained to see? I should say a little bit that most of my training is as a yogi. We're in the Himalayas with a certain yogic master called Babaji, who some of you may have heard about. He was last in a body in 1984, and I was very fortunate to spend a bit of time with him before he left. So for the last 25, 26 years, I've been in intensive yogic training. And in yogic training, you're trying to expand your consciousness. But after about 10 years, and my teacher taught me mostly telepathically, Babaji did not have, you couldn't have a conversation with him. He would say, sit down, meditate, and listen. I'll talk to you inside. That's a bit tricky for a Westerner. It's like, oh, there's all kinds of conversations going on inside. How do I know? Babaji, I haven't got it here, but I did write a little autobiography, which is actually part of the story. I wrote it in 1994, and it was about what happened to me in 1984 and a few other people. And I published it in 2004. And it's called Shiva's Rainbow. You can get it on Amazon. It talks about going to see a yogic master, then coming back into the world. And at that time, I was a government advisor on radioactive waste management. They had accepted that they got it wrong, and they'd invited Greenpeace's experts, of which I was one, onto their committees and said, come, talk to us, we've got to sort this out. So I had a foot in these two weird worlds. Meanwhile, we discovered, or a group of martial artists discovered, that illegal radioactive waste was being dumped off the coast of Cornwall illegally. And they came to Greenpeace. At the time, one of my brothers was working in the Greenpeace office. He rang me up and he said, Peter, we've got some really important news here. We've discovered an illegal dumping operation. We've got to get, really on the case. So I said, okay, and I was an expert in radioactive waste at the time. So then Robert, my brother, said, there's only one problem. The guys who discovered this did it by astral traveling. Oh no. How do we put that to Greenpeace top management? And I said, well, I mean, it is an incredible story, and it's there in the book. Now, many of you will know, and I mean, it's not, you don't actually have to be able to do it. You can watch the movies, the Men Who Stare at Goats. That was a real program that the American Secret Service adopted. They brought in adepts and said, can you train us to do this? Because an astral traveler can come into this. I mean, if we were like a secret military meeting, they could be there listening, and meanwhile it's their astral body that's traveled. Meanwhile, their real body is lying there talking to the Russian Secret Service. And the Russians had invested heavily in it too, which is why the Americans did. And then the real adepts can give you a hard time on the astral level. I mean, you can feel it. So I mean, this is woo land as far as modern green culture is concerned. So the reason I'm saying this is that a green professor, huge respect for this guy, he wrote a fantastic book called Soil and Soul. He's got an activist record. He defended the Hebrides from super quarries. And Greenpeace had come to him, or other organizations as well, and said, who's this guy Peter Taylor? The things he's saying, how do we deal with this? And he said, well, I can't judge his science. Well, actually, the science is written so that any scientist can understand it. But I understand he's written another book called Shiva's Rainbow. Let's have a look at that. And so he then puts out on the internet, and you know how viral it can go, that you don't need to listen to this guy. Do you know he's been into astral travel? It was the other guys. But we did actually find that what they were talking about was true. And we did actually find barrels of nuclear waste where they said there would be. And one or two people in Greenpeace top management knew about this and approved of what we did. But Alistair McIntosh, professor of human ecology at Edinburgh University, just says, oh, and also he actually talks about homeopathy and astrology and you know. So you don't need to listen to anything about what he says at all, because he's obviously not quite a kosher scientist. And what was Greenpeace doing with the guy? Well, if he would read the book, he would find out that Greenpeace knew exactly what we were doing, and he could read about all the successes of our work at the UN to bring in the precautionary principle, adopt clean production strategies. That was really hard technical, scientific, and political work by a really good team, which I was part of. You can't exist on that level if you're in woo-woo land. You can't. And those Greenpeace guys, they would look at me and they'd go, oh, Peter, you've got that funny hair on the back of your head again, you know, which is like the Shiva tassel. And one month I was in retreat, and my teacher had told me, you only wear white. And I got a call, can you attend this meeting of the Paris Commission, which is actually a meeting in Berlin, on, you know, waste discharges, you know, next week. Yeah, I'm in an ashram at the moment, but I could come over and, you know, affairs paid, the whole deal. But I just have to say, I will be all in white. So I come into this meeting with all the dark suits and the ties and so on. I have got a shaved head and I've got a white, you know, it wasn't a proper suit. It was more like a, never mind. And it was just like, oh, you could see them all going, what is this? But that didn't stop me from technical, legal, and scientific argument right in front of them. And then they know you're speaking their language and they treat you seriously. They don't give a toss about, you know, what kind of hairstyle you've got or what you're wearing. They suddenly realize, hey, these Greenpeace guys know what they're talking about. That is not the case today. So what is going on? So the shaman is trained to see energy flow, form, and pattern through time. To the shaman, somebody like Al Gore is sucking in a huge amount of energy. You want to know where it goes. The shaman is trained to see energy imbalances. And we're all imbalanced. We all have desires that pull us away. I'll talk about it a little bit more. But also desires and the will to power, the will to be in control, to be secure, to be top. It's a bit like having a sort of sixth sense that the wolf pack has. You know who the top dog is. You know what happens if you say something out of line. So the shaman's world exists as a kind of network of power. And you're trained to see the power moving and the net. And in that world, just as in any biological world, there are predators. Predators that feed on energy. Now you all know that. You all know people to avoid because they're actually feeding on your energy field. But that happens culturally as well. And wherever you have predators, you have deception. And I'll talk specifically about that. But also, there's another element which I personally, in all of my spiritual training, in yoga and whatever else went before then, never appreciated until very, very recently. And that is the nature of game. You find games all over the animal kingdom. That's how young animals, especially predators, train. It's not real, nobody's going to get hurt, but there's a lot of play, a lot of game. Now, if you notice about human beings compared to the other apes, particularly, because we have an ape's body, we are much more into games. Games are everywhere, especially ball games, but there are all kinds of games. And one thing I've learned, not just from astrology, as above, so below, game must be an inherent part of the divinity of the universe. God and the goddess play games. They set games up. Games are often about competition. Yes, it's fun, but it's also about competition. It's about testing. It's sometimes about finding the best within yourself, but sometimes you can only do that in competition. So a real master wants to be met and challenged. Otherwise, it's going to get boring. They're at the top. And the young bucks can only know how good they are by coming up against that competition. So humans are full of that. So what's that got to do with climate change? Well, let's look. Al Gore. What's his game? Well, we know a certain degree in the background he has a bank. And he has a lot of friends in the banking world, the Masonic world particularly. Now, what he would have you focus on are the fact that you are a carbon life form. And in fact, I can't take much credit for this because, as you know, in the shamanic world, we often have to seek help from the plant kingdom. Now, you wouldn't think that an intelligent ape could get much help from the lowly plant kingdom, but any shaman knows that's actually where the greatest wisdom lies. And in a particular plant called ayahuasca, how many people have experienced an ayahuasca journey? Great. That plant is the queen of the forest. And in Brazil, the shamans will tell you, if you want to know anything, you just ask her. We call her the library. So our little shamanic crew that very much holds this festival together, you'll find people with the shamanic training on the gate, in the ticket office, the organizers. We've all sat around, we've done ceremony, we've drunk the tea, we've done the prayers. That's the world behind this festival. So I asked ayahuasca, what on earth is this dude up to? Because I'm not enough of a shaman to be able to see. And she said, it's all about frequency. Carbon has a particular frequency. And by focusing on carbon, you will be drawn into that frequency. This man is a magician. He wants you to look only at the carbon frequency. You tune into carbon, you are all carbon life forms. The crucial thing about carbon life forms, and it's taken 500 million years to evolve you, is you're very complex. I'm one of you, more or less. It's a complex life form. It has therefore a limited lifespan. The simpler you are, if you're just one cell, you're pretty much eternal. But the more of a complex carbon life form you are, the more conscious you're going to be that you have a limited lifespan. You are all going to die. So as soon as Al Gore starts talking carbon frequency, he's talking about survival. He's a merchant of fear, and he's a merchant of certain death. And some American wit once said, there's only two things certain in life. One of them is death, the other is taxes. Well, with Mr. Gore, you get a special kind of tax. You get a carbon tax. So what? We've got to do that, haven't we? We've got to stop fossil fuels and all that, you know. No. Yeah, look at that. Don't look at the fact that a carbon tax trumps the gold standard, the dollar, the renminbi, every damn currency on the planet. Carbon currency is a global currency, and it's a credit. It's not real, it's a piece of paper. And he's got the bank, right? Along with a lot of other people and his friends. So carbon bank, carbon trading, carbon credits, global currency. Does anybody know what else that means? It means the power goes to those people who make decisions for what? Where to invest the money. That's called development. So if you want to clear 1 million acres of Brazilian rainforest, you're going to need a loan from the bank. And if you want to plant ethanol biofuels to put in your tank, you're going to need a loan from the bank. If you want to put turbines, barrages, hydro schemes in remote, wildlife-rich biodiversity spots, If you want to clear X million people off the savannas of Africa because they're not producing anything and they're not in the economy, you're going to need a loan from the bank. The bankers make all the decisions on the planet as to what gets built, what gets developed, what gets invested in, and what the return is. They are a bureaucracy. They are a global unelected bureaucracy. You have no opportunity to vote for them. That's why Al Gore is no longer in the business of being voted for. All of your carbon taxes will have to go into a bank, and some bureaucrats will have to decide who gets to spend it where. You will have no say in that. This is called green economy. In the Midwest, they call it green Stalinism. Now, I have no friends in the Midwest of the United States, but they see it as it is. They see it as an attempt to what they used to call communists and socialists to take over. What they really mean is just faceless bureaucrats who nobody's elected, who have a plan and an idea of how human life should be and how society should be ordered. And they spent years fighting that and lost a lot of their children in the process. So that's become what green has become, in a way, is entangled in that particular game. But of course, it's not kosher to say this. So when I studied climate change, I quickly realized that all of those cycles that you saw could only come from the sun. And I didn't know hardly anything about the sun. But the sun is cyclic. It's cyclic not in much in terms of the visible light that it puts out. That stays pretty much the same. It varies by 0.1%. But the light that you cannot see, ultraviolet, that varies by about 10%. The magnetic fields vary enormously. They've gone up by 200% in the last 100 years, coincident with global warming. If you go back to what was called the Little Ice Age, when Europe froze, the northern hemisphere froze, massive starvation, famine and disease everywhere, 400 years ago, and you go to the climate scientists who really know, and they say, yeah, it's very funny, at that time the magnetic field of the sun dropped and stayed low for nearly 100 years. Oh, that's interesting, because the magnetic field of the sun dropped about 3 years ago, and it's hardly come back up again. Now that's very interesting, because the climate shifted immediately. It did that. We could go into the detailed science of that, and I'll talk about it. To me, it's to do with the magnetic effects on the jet stream and the storm patterns. And you can explain everything you've seen, all this extreme weather. It's the jet stream shifting. And the best climate scientists will tell you, the fires in Russia last summer, the jet stream shifted. The flooding in Pakistan, the same thing. The jet stream does this. The incredible, I mean, go back a couple of years, sunrise was completely wiped out. We were a foot underwater. And I went to the Met Office where they would still talk to me. I said, hey, the jet stream shifted and we just got dumped on. Where are your experts on the jet stream? I want to talk to them. I want to know, you know, have you got any archive records of the jet stream? Jet stream? They hadn't anybody working on the jet stream in 2007, 2008. Now you will find they're working flat out to try and understand it. Guess what? 2003, a team at NASA, top scientists, discovered that the jet stream during the Little Ice Age shifted south. I thought, oh, okay, so what else could affect that? Guess what? The ultraviolet light drops when the magnetics drop, and the ultraviolet light affects, through heat transfer physics, it affects the jet stream. That was all published in 2003. When I rang up NASA, what happened to that team? They're working on something else now. The director of that unit is a rabid follower of Al Gore. They're in cahoots, James Hansen. You will find James Hansen quoted in The Guardian, The Observer, The Independent, every left liberal paper, and all of the Green Movement and the UN. He's their favorite scientist. They will not talk to anybody who is talking about the jet stream. It'll all happen. It'll come out. It's 2 years on, and there's more coming out every day. But I want to go a bit deeper on this. So it's the sun. Now, before I'm quoted, I reckon it's about 80% natural cycles driven by the sun. 20% carbon dioxide. I'm not a denier. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. It's just been overplayed, and I can give you the science on that. And a colleague and I are actually working on a science paper on that right now. So yes, it's got warmer. Yes, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and yes, it has a role, but it's a small one, about 20%. Half your emissions, and you're dealing with 10% of the driving force. It's so important as to what the natural cycle will do next. And that was why the book was called Chill, because I think it might just get cold. And we've already had the cooling in the northern hemisphere in key places. I'll come to that. That's where we grow the world's food surpluses. They've all had a drop in yields. You'll read about it this year. I predicted it 3 years ago. 2011, world food crisis. We won't have enough to feed everybody. It's the sun. But don't look at the sun. Why? Because you're dealing with an element. The sun is mostly hydrogen. It's not a complex life form. It's simple, elemental, eternal. If you look at its magnetic field, it's a plasmic web. It goes out beyond Pluto. It's got rhythms. If you could hear it, it's like a whole symphony playing. It's a sound system. It's got a beating heart. It's got an 11-year orgasmic cycle for any ladies present. It winds itself up to a frenzy and then comes down. And then it winds itself up again and comes down on an 11-year, more or less, cycle. All of this is invisible. Ethereal, cyclic, and of course the sun. The sun is the free spirit. Every astrologer uses the sun as a symbol for our creative heart. It's about originality. It's the creative source. Every shamanic culture looks to the sun. They don't worship the sun. They connect with the sun. We are a fractal of the sun. Stonehenge, if you've ever done ceremony in Stonehenge, when the sun is there, you know the whole thing is vibrating. It's reconnecting you. You are a fractal of the creative source, and the sun is connected to the galactic center. We will come on to in 2011 in a minute, in 2012 in a minute. This is spirituality. If you go down that route, what's going to happen? You're going to lose your fear. You're going to identify with eternity itself, with your inner self, with your spirit. And nobody is going to be able to fool and deceive you. Just a brief look at that world of science on the left. And a lovely lady friend of mine said, "Oh, Peter, you're so structural, just a guy. And us women, we're generative." I said, "Oh, I like that. I like that." If you look at science, it's structural. Logic, intuition, it does play a role, but it's mostly denigrated. Structural, it's very much in the mind. Science is in the mind, not the body. And if you go into the mind rather than the body, you're not going to feel much. If you take the mind into the body, that's where the feeling is. Structural, linear. Science is linear. They miss the whole business about cycles. Science is about repeating experiments, exactly. But in reality, nothing ever repeats because we're moving through time and space. 2012, we will not be coming back to the same place 26,000 years ago that the sun center conjuncted. We'll be a spiral above it. Same longitude, but consciousness will be different. Science deals a lot with constants and fixed elements, whereas actually the whole of life is evolutionary and constantly changing. Structural can also be protective. The true male, with his power, is a protective force. The feminine equivalent of that is an embracing. Males like to order things, whereas the opposite of that, and I don't mean women and men opposite, positive, negative. We haven't got yin yang are a better words. Ordering, chaotic, constant changing and irregular, light, dark, imagining where you're putting it all out, dreaming where you receive, building, birthing. On the left is a description of science. On the right is a description of knowledge. And recently we did a very wonderful ceremony in Glastonbury where the men and the women, for the first time, and I've been there 13 years, for the first time we came together in a dance with all of the kind of shamanic guys and all of the shamanic women and all of the power holders. The women organized it, and they said to me, would you come over and just look after the men while make a little fire while we do ceremony? We've got something we want to say to you. So I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So we had 14 men around the fire, and I said, you know, I think the women, they'll call us with a conch in a couple of hours, and it would be really nice to take them something. Well, we can do some medicine bundle work. I can explain that later if anyone doesn't know what that is. You weave your prayers into a little bundle. We put all the bundles together, we'll take that to the women. But, you know, I think what they're going to do is they're going to apologize. They're going to say that we're really sorry for the hard time that we've given you guys over the last couple of decades. It's all to patriarchy. We know that. We're all very damaged, and we've given you guys a really hard time. And that's going to be amazing. But you know what? I think we should take them a dance. Are you up for it? And the men said, yeah, cool. So we choreographed a little dance. And sure enough, the women said, we're sorry, we've given you such a hard time, and we've really squashed you down sometimes, and so on. And so we said, thank you, and here's our medicine bundle. I said, but we really don't feel that squashed. Actually, we're feeling really good right now, and we got a little dance for you. And so we did it together. And it was a real expression of what it is to be a true man, which is that we, as men, have the power to take everything that is into our hearts. And so we did that. It's a bit like a kind of Avalonian equivalent of the New Zealand haka. We really got into the kind of male power, and we take all of that into our hearts. Everything there is, there's earth as well, we take that into our hearts. And we were singing, I'm not going to do it now, but I had a whole choir to back me up before. And so it's like, and then everything. The women were laughing anyway. And then it's like into our hearts. Everything. That's what he's doing. Total silence. Women cry. It's just amazing. So this is the real work. The fusion of consciousness. That's alchemical. That's 200 meters away from Arthur's grave and 200 meters away from the Tor and all the ley lines meeting in the heart chakra of the planet. You know, okay, so this is the woo-woo land that the science world dismisses. But this is our world here. This is what this festival is all about. It's about the heart, it's about creativity, it's about music, it's about feeling the earth. That's not what Al Gore is about. No, Professor McIntosh said, this guy says in his autobiography, he got into wearing pinstripe suits and flying business class. Well, if you're going to pose in the UN as an international lawyer, you've got to wear a suit. Secondly, I still got it. Secondly, You fly business class because if you miss the plane, you can get on the next one. He holds that against me. Al Gore has his own plane. How many suits do you think he's got? He's got a mansion that would completely dwarf my carbon footprint. I live in a shared house. That is the mentality that you're up against. No more words for that. So where's the imbalance coming from? When you leave here, you're going to go back into the imbalanced world that does not support your creativity. Now, I want to skip this bit because I want to get closer to the end. You all know the story. The imbalance is there in this patriarchal structural world, which is completely destroying the planet, irrespective of what climate does, because before the Industrial Revolution, before everybody could be industrialized, you had to get rid of the only smart people on the planet. And by that I mean the ones who had the wisdom. The ancients called wisdom Sophia. They had a name for it. That little ceremony that we did when I was called in said, we've got a new goddess. I got another one in Glastonbury. And it's we don't know much about it. And we've built this figure and so on. But we know she's called Sophia. And I just had a big, deep download about Sophia. Shown how stupid I'd been in my rational, structural mind, particularly in relationships with certain women. And I'm going, oh my God. I couldn't see the wisdom because it wasn't rational, it wasn't logical, it didn't make sense. But someone knew what would happen and was trying to get me to change, and I didn't. And sure enough, it all went tits up. And Spirit was saying, if you'd listen to her, that is feminine wisdom. That's what the ancients talked about. It's intuitive. It's coming from a deeper place. It's dark. It's not logical. It's not rational. The women teachers who had that were systematically executed, humiliated, tortured, and they were ritually executed. So no wonder alchemy came to an end. The alchemists were hiding from the same patriarchs, the church. And something else began. I called it JFB. Jobs for the boys. Technology, banking, industry, commerce, weaponry, scientific agriculture, biocides, genetic manipulation, medicine, all since the end of alchemy and since the women were suppressed. The military-industrial complex, Eisenhower warned about this. You all know about the military-industrial complex, but he also said, beware of the scientists. They will seek to set policy. And look around at the language that's being used. War on terror, you all know what that means. War on poverty, what do you think? That's okay, isn't it? But it isn't. Look more carefully at it. Who does it benefit? War on drugs. The more money they spend on helicopters and gunships and everything in Colombia, guess what happens? The supply increases and the price drops. When the Taliban ruled Afghanistan, well, first of all, when the Russians went in to Afghanistan during the communist era, at the end of the communist era, certain Russians had enough money to buy all the companies. They're currently called the oligarchs. Where did they get their money from? Afghanistan during the Soviet era supplied 95% of the global heroin trade. When the Taliban kicked the Russians out, it was 2%. When the Americans took over, guess what happened? Went back up to 95%. Here you have a super sophisticated occupation with every surveillance thing under the sun and a huge industry. War on cancer, war on disease, war on climate. You have to look who it's benefiting. I won't go into too much detail. You know most of this stuff anyway. This was a presentation to a lot of straight people who hadn't really thought about these things. You already have. I want to get on to Om Namah Shivaya. How do we deal with this damaged culture? I now have to go into, between now and 2012, a different mode. All of my guides are saying, you can't turn this round, not in time. We have to do something else. And what I've been doing is looking at my yogic knowledge and how to heal the damage. And if you look at that diagram, and most of you are familiar with the chakra system. Yeah, anybody not familiar with it? Great. You can't get far if your base chakra is closed. It's fundamentally your source of power. It's where all the energy, the kundalini power, the serpent power, everything that you've heard about comes through your base chakra. If the base chakra is closed down, you've no power for the rest of the journey. It's mostly a mental exercise. The base chakra has to be opened. The kundalini power is not just a little bit of electricity. It's a psychic power. It's not something that science can really describe. That's why the ancients symbolized it as a serpent. Serpents are masters of waveform. If you try to wiggle across this room by just using that waveform, you're not going to get very far. A python would do it in next to no time. They're masters of that, of the wave. In deep yogic practice, the wave is a current, a spiral current, and it comes out in the form of a cobra hood, shamanically. Shiva yogis are shamans, and they are invoking the power of the serpent and the cobra. But all of that power has to come up through the chakras. Now, if you have any negative thought pattern, it will shut down a whole chakra. That's where your heart shuts down. Just memories. A lot of childhood memories. The base chakra will shut down if you are worried about where you live, where your next meal is coming from, where you belong, and whether you can walk freely on the ground. So what does this culture do? It completely damages the base chakra. Worry about mortgage, rent, jobs, security, security, security. Which is the most security conscious nation on earth? The United States. It has no social security to talk of. Security for them is independent finance and money. They are the richest nation on earth and militarily the most powerful nation on earth. And guess what? They're the most insecure nation on earth. What happens when you damage a chakra? The psychic power of that chakra projects outwards. And in this case, the Americans project their shadow of base insecurity and then go looking for it. That's why they create the war on terror. But what is the name of the agent of their insecurity? Does anyone know what Al-Qaeda means in Arabic? It means the base. Once you have got your base sorted out, you've got your feet on the earth, you're secure, you know where your next meal is coming from, you're not worried about anything, and actually you can enter that space quite easily. You're all perfectly safe right now, and you're well fed, and you're secure. If you can just get that on a mental level, your base chakra will open up, and guess what will happen? You'll get horny. As soon as you feel really, really safe and secure and on the earth, you're up for it. So what do we do with our children? I mean, they're relatively secure, right? As teenagers. We damage their sexual chakra. We so overhype sexuality that as soon as the energy comes up, And what happens to the girls? All this drawn out projected energy is coming at them. So they shut down. And so the boys are completely off center and the women are completely insecure. And how do we teach boys to deal with that energy surge? We don't. I got taught by another 11-year-old. We do that? Oh no, you know. And then it's like, well, what's everyone doing? Jerking it off. You're actually training yourself to be the world's worst lover. It's like that energy needs to come up. It needs, for the guys especially, it needs to come up here. So you have to have a training to conserve and seal your energy field, not leak it out sexually, because that energy is needed for the third part of the journey, the hara. This is your power center. If the energy is not getting in here, you haven't got any power. You look at martial artists, the incredible power. They can put their hand through bricks. I've seen Buddhist monks, highly trained in martial arts, crack an iron bar on their skull and break the bar. I've seen an 8-year-old Aikido master. Well, it was actually Shaolin monk. He asked in the Albert Hall, the first time they came over to Britain, and he asked 6 of the best martial artists to come and hit him in the stomach. He's a frail-looking character. These great big black dudes come down, bang, and he's just standing there. Go away. 6 of them, one after the other, no impact. 12 Buddhist monks come running out of the telegraph pole onto the stage. Takes it in the stomach, poof, and they get knocked back. That is power. That's the power of this center. It takes 30 years to take that energy up from the earth and hold it and hold it and hold it in your hara. And all of Aikido and all of martial arts and a lot of dance is about that. Extending your ki from that power center. But even then, once you've got that power, it's got to come up to the heart. If you don't have the power, everybody has authority over you. You're not going to stand up to the power structure. You don't have a free will. How many of you can say that when you leave here, you can do exactly what you want to do? You're not going to go into any job that you don't want to do. You're not going to do anything you don't want to do. How many can say that? That's about right, percentage-wise, for this culture that we have called freedom and democracy. There's nobody, very few people have a free will. That's our culture. It's not possible. Once you do this work, you can't do that. You can't do it. Especially when you've got somebody in false authority, some Egypt, telling you what to do, and you know they're wrong. But you have to because you want to keep your job and your security. So we're getting into what the damage is all about. And we come to the heart. And we're coming into the heart from below. This is something that healers know about, and rebirthers especially, working with the healing power of the earth, that bring it in from below. The Druids called this gateway the Derwen. And the ally for this journey is the oak, and the oak flower to open this door. When Jesus said, knock on the door and it will be open, this is what he was talking about. The Kundalini has to come into the heart from below. But in the bottom of the heart, the basement of the heart, is all the reasons why you've closed your heart. All the damage, all the betrayals, all the memories. And as soon as that energy comes in, it's going to activate them. That's your shadow. The revenge, how to get back at, how to not forgive, how to not let them get away with it, especially that woman, that guy. The unforgiveness is there. So we have to work with that. And when we're working now, we're working with the dance, we work with Western songs, not mantras. We work with the blues. And we work with Western musicians who can wrench that heart open. Once you feel it, it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. All that pain, you're not going to feel it now. It's pain, but you're going to bloody well sing the blues. You're going to make a song about it and a dance about it. And that means it's coming up into the heart and it's joy. It doesn't matter how much pain you've experienced, you can always, always celebrate the divine with the pain. So that's another element of the dance. This heart's got to open, but even then the journey isn't over, and very, very few people go higher. As you come up to the higher levels of the heart, this is the Buddha territory. This is the territory of compassion for all beings. You cannot go there until you've had compassion completely for this being that's done this journey. All those fuck-ups, all the mistakes, everything you've ever done wrong, all the guilt, the shame. You've got to let it go. In order to really feel this, that whole story's got to go. And actually, the hardest part to let go of is the romance. I mean, romance means story, your story, the individual story, the ego. This is the yogic journey. It's got to be let go of. You've got to move to the 5th level, which is the truth that we are one human being. There's only one humanity evolving here. We're all in it together, and we move at the pace of the slowest. That truth, to let that go, we're working on it. We're working on it. And that's about where we are with our progress. We started 6 years ago with a shamanic dance, and we're here. And the next level is the vision. How many people in this culture live with that truth? It's a very hard truth to live with. And how many have vision? Strong vision. And by that I mean they're dreaming their dream. Because if your dream is dreamt with all of those chakras open, guess what happens? It manifests. It does. So as a healer, and we do, a lot of healers here, we know not to open all these circuits up too quickly because they energize the shadow. And the last thing you want is to manifest all of your dreams right now, because a lot of them are negative. A lot of them are negative about you, about me. So that's all got to be purified. So you've got to go back to the base. And it's work. It takes years to clear all of this. And now I want to say something about 2012. I'll go through all the base, and of course indigenous people didn't have to do any of this. They didn't have the damage. Okay, 7th heaven. What is the purpose of it all? Now, here we really enter some tricky shamanic territory. It's called the ghost dance. When the Native Americans were faced with the second wave, they'd already faced the white man and his army coming in and saying, "We want your land now." They'd made friends before that. But now it was like, we've got a special place for you now. It's, a reservation. And okay, it's 1,000 miles away and you'll all have to walk. But, we'll take your land now. We'll offer you a treaty. Some of you can stay, maybe have 100 acres here or whatever. These are Plains Indians. They're not farmers. So the warriors just said, "Oh, we'll fight them. We beat them once before. They thought they were the best cavalry in the world. We taught them a lesson." General Custer. The shaman said, no, this battle cannot be won. They will come in such great numbers. No respect. This isn't a battle for honor or warriorhood. This is extermination. This is genocide. And we can't win. We have to take this to another level. We have to dance. Sitting Bull, who, as you know, beat General Custer and was that archetypal Plains warrior, was also a shaman. And so he said, okay guys, the shamans have talked, we dance. And some of the braves wouldn't do it, but most of them did. And the last ghost dance was at Wounded Knee. That's what Wounded Knee was. It was a ghost dance. And they tried to say to the military, look, this is a peace dance, you know, and they even had a guy called Wovoka, who I feel very close to, who said to the Indian agencies, look, I'm a missionary, I'm a priest, and we're really with you on this Jesus thing, you know, peace, love, that's what we're about, really, and this dance is a peace dance. But they didn't trust him, and they surrounded the dance with cannon and machine guns. And at some point, something triggered, and they massacred everybody, men, women, children. What was happening? What was the ghost dance? How do you take it to another level? The shamans are now telling us, 2012, big stuff coming down. Now I'm just repeating what they've told me. I have been shown things, I've seen visions, so what? But for me, it's already there. The beginning of this year, if you were living in Russia when the fires were there, if you were living in Pakistan, if you were living in Mobile, the American town that got completely wiped out by tornadoes, if you were living in Fukushima, your world would already have ended. You would already be in the end time. It's happening. So what is it? What is this end time? A lot of people talk about the survival elements. That's not what we're about. We're all going to die anyway. How cool is it if we go together? You know, it's like, what? But this is not about death, and it's not about survival. It's about the quality of consciousness. What the ghost dance, those Native Americans were dancing for, was they were saying, actually, what's at stake here is not our community, but humanity, consciousness itself. These guys have lost the plot. They're not conscious. We have to embed in the other world, the sub-quantum reality, we've got to embed what it is to be a human being, and we've got to do it really strong, because these guys are taking over. So they had to dream it, and the ghost dance is a dream dance, and that's why it took 4 days and some people died. They're working all the time with the rhythm, with the kundalini, and they're bringing it up here, and then they dream. And that dream was that at some point in the future, the true human being would manifest in the children of the soldiers that we're facing. They will come to know and respect the ways of the red man. That time is here and now, and you will know it. You can see the teepees, and the Native American teachings are everywhere, and we honor them. So that time is now. This is the end time. And some of those shamans said, and we're coming back to help with this. And the Mayans are back here. All the shamans are back. All the yogis are back. Every conscious being who's trying to raise consciousness is back at this time to raise consciousness. For what? So I just give you my theory. But it's drawn and born here in Sunrise from sitting with Hugh and Jeff Stray and Mark Healy, and getting to understand, and the astrologers, and getting to understand exactly what 2012 is about. 2012 is about the rising sun at winter solstice conjuncting galactic center. It hasn't done that for 26,000 years. It's only an angle, but in astrology, it's a symbol. And what it's a symbol for is that at that point, galactic center, 27 Sagittarius, there is a portal. And humanity has had 26,000 years to evolve something. What is it? It's not these microphones. It's not the technology, the energy systems, it's consciousness itself. What aspect of consciousness? The quality of the heart, creativity, music, that is consciousness itself. And that is what we have to do, what the Native Americans did. We've got to take all of that we have as the new indigenous peoples onto that dream level. Then it doesn't matter what happens here. We might lose everything, but we will have done our work, and that consciousness will be residing in the Mayan, and maybe we'll get a chance over the weekend to talk about this. But talking with Jeff and John Major Jenkins, who was recently in Glastonbury, the Mayan tablets talk about the return of the great Jaguar king. To an archaeologist, that means that this dude, who in 600 AD was called the Jaguar king, thinks he's going to reincarnate and come back in 2012. And that's what the whole tablet is about. They're not reading it shamanically. Why would the top priest king in the Mayan culture, fantastic culture surrounded by jungle, why did they have their chief deity a jaguar and a black one? Why? It's a predator. But for them it was the ultimate deity. They called it the eater of souls. In the tablets they talk about the return, not of some jaguar king, the return of the ultimate predator, the ultimate eater of souls. And they did special dances with black jaguar skins. We've been doing dances to the black jaguar since 2004 without understanding why. I only learnt this last year. In Native American culture, the black jaguar is the power, the animal power, to lend you the courage to enter the void. That's beyond form. To go there on a shamanic level, you have to be rooted in your eternal spirit, because everything else disappears. Yet your point of consciousness remains, and you are one with everything. There's no difference. So we have to take that level of consciousness. And another element of the tablet said, this will be the time of the harvest of the white flower souls. So I've been thinking, what is that? What is that? What is that? And talking with people from Mayan country and shamans and dancers, they say the white flower souls are you guys. We are the white flower souls. We are the ones who are working constantly to raise the consciousness of humanity. It doesn't matter how you do it. You teach yoga, you teach dance, you're a musician. You're here because you want to raise the vibration. This is a human story and you want it to be as good as it gets. That's the job. That's our job. And the harvest is the energy that we create from that work. And she, the cosmic mother, the great black jaguar in the sky, is going to come and take it. Now, on a cosmic physics level, she can do that with a massive galactic kundalini wave that we're dust. That can happen anytime. You can call it a supernova, it doesn't matter what you call it. She is quite capable of turning us to dust in an instant tomorrow. But this still lives. And so if she wants this, and she wants to take it and birth it in some other part of the galaxy in a whole new way, that's her business. It's not ours. Ours is to do the best we can. If she births it here again, that's her business. What's the lifespan of a human soul? You all thought it was eternal. Maybe not. Maybe like every other thing that's ever lived, it has a birth, a life, and a death. Maybe 2012 is, come in, your number is up. And maybe not, I don't know. But it could be. It doesn't matter. because the one thing I am certain of is we're going to be dancing, and we're going to have done the work, and we've got 18 months. We're going to be as juicy as we can possibly get, and we're going to give it all back to her. So that's the ghost dance. Don't listen to Mr. Gore. Yes, we have to do stuff about energy and all of that, and I can talk to you about that. But the real stuff, the real work, is actually what we're doing here in Sunrise. So enjoy.